again, this class reminds me a lot of the 2016 class. I mentioned like Breece Hall being Zeke and Kenneth Walker being Derrick Henry, but like really the wide receivers too, Corey Coleman, wide receiver 1, Will Fuller, wide receiver 2, and then the best, most productive one was Michael Thomas. But you had a lot of wide receivers being drafted in round 1, round 2, round 3. And like which ones hit? I don't know. It just seemed like a massive coin flip where either the wide receiver was a colossal bust or he was, hyper productive, Will Fuller, Michael Thomas, except there wasn't too many of them. I think there'll be a few more of those successful types in this class, but it does feel very coin flippish on each one. And if you talk to, like I had my 5 go-to film heads, right? Former PFF buddies, Greg Cosell, who works with our site, people like that, and Danny Kelly of The Ringer. And you talk to them, and 3 guys say Drake London is Hakeem Butler. And then 3 others say he's the best wide receiver in the class. 3 say Treylon Burks is a worser version of Laviska Shenault. Jim Nagy said that on our podcast. And then 3 others will say he's A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf in one player. And it's like, what? How is that possible? How can these people watch the same thing and come away with those conclusions? And I have no idea. And so all I did was ranked my wide receivers according to my production model and addressed their very glaring, very damning red flags. And right now I'm add in the athleticism component and try and come up with a ranking. And it's tricky. This class is tricky.
It feels like more so than the last couple of years anyway, that the range of outcomes from different analysis and different even scouts or the NFL kind of drafts that are coming out, the mock drafts, they vary so much from person to person. And that's kind of what you're hinting at there. But there's a couple of guys here I want to see for you, how you feel about them. And that's Jameson Williams and Chris Olave. Do you think that they're pretty close in this class? Do you think they are both guys that are going to be productive at the NFL, or do you think they're guys that are going to fall by the wayside? Because there's a lot of question marks with some of the bits that you've mentioned so far there.
Yeah, I said Greg Cosell works for the site. He said basically Taekwon Thornton, a player I love, was basically a more physical Chris Olave on tape. Like the same player, but with far more physicality. And it's just like, it's just crazy how, so low some of these guys can get. But no, my model said Jameson Williams was the wide receiver 2, and then basically tied wide receiver 3 with Garrett Wilson. Jameson Williams red flag. He has a couple, and they're very damning. One is extremely low BMI, lower BMI than Devonta Smith. We spent all offseason talking about, and he's even lower than that.
Skinny legs.
You could say he's a lot faster, to be fair, but you could say, the training, the ACL, lack of training played a role in that. And like, that's fine, whatever. The ACL, like that's not a concern to me at all. Some people are like, oh, you fade him and then buy low later after he's like week 8 and he's done nothing because he didn't play and he missed training camp. That's not persuasive to me. The big red flag is that he's a one-year wonder. And it's not just that he is, he didn't miss the prerequisite breakout age and he only had 1 year of meaningful production. It's that he was legitimately bad in 2020, or at least the numbers were legitimately bad in 2020. It's a false narrative that he wasn't seeing the field. It's just fake news. He was on the field. He had 40 fewer routes run than Chris Olave, but only 21% of his yards on 82% of the routes. And how is that? And like, so now you're saying take him above Chris Olave when Chris Olave was running absolute circles around him. He ranked 15th worst of 115 qualifying, or 12th worst of 165 qualifying Power 5 wide receivers in routes run. It was 573 fewer yards and 40 fewer routes. Like, so he's on the field and he just did nothing. Chris Olave running circles around him. What do you do with that? It's a damning red flag. It's scary. I'll just say I watched the tape and like the dude was always open. And I just don't know why Fields never looked his way, but he never looked his way. And then Chris Olave, really impressive numbers, has the breakout age, broke out as a sophomore, led the team the next year, bested Garrett Wilson by a decent margin in yards per game, like really great historic levels or like top 3 levels of yardage market share and yards per team pass attempt and things like that. And then the next year fell to wide receiver 3. But again, Garrett Wilson's awesome. Jackson Smith-Njigba is awesome. So that is like a slight red flag. But the big red flag to me is that he just like plays like a wussy. That's the narrative on him. And it's just really backed up by the numbers. He forced 1 missed tackle all of last year. He ranked 50th in receptions, 521st in missed tackles. Skye Moore, David Bell, Wan'Dale Robinson, Drake London, John Mechie, they all had at least 20 missed tackles. Drake London averaged 1 missed tackle every 3.3 receptions in college. That ranks top 7 since 2014. That was more than Deebo Samuel. That's more than Laviska Shenault, than DJ Moore, and like all those other guys. Chris Olave, 1 missed tackle every 19.6 receptions. That's worse than Zach Ertz, unanimously regarded as like the least elusive player in football. It was by far worse in the class. By career yards after contact per reception, he was worse than the top 25 wide receivers. He was second worst by career yards after the catch per reception. I mean, he beasted by a bunch of other stuff, but like that's a red flag to me. That's like a pretty damning one. So how do you rank them? I don't know. It's just these guys are super risky.
Well, you mentioned the risk, and that's kind of one of the fun parts of this class because there also could be some outsized reward. And one of the reasons is that we expect the Packers and the Chiefs to take some guys toward the end of the first round. Should drafters be emphasizing this in their sort of pre-draft leagues? You mentioned that you have a ton of rookie drafts that go before the NFL draft. Obviously, there's a lot of best ball that is happening and still happening. How are you looking at that? Or is it just too hard to tell? I mean, one of the things that you had mentioned here is that some people are very high on Drake London and Treylon Burks. Some people are very low on those guys, and obviously vice versa, that kind of thing. Too hard to tell where these guys are going to go, even in terms of kind of breaking it down, like top 15 picks and next 15 picks in the first round.
I don't know. This is a good question. What do you think, Shawn? It's sort of like, do we just trust the projected draft capital? I'm inclined to lean in that direction. I mean, I remember. N'Keal Harry, who a lot of people were low on, and then he goes to Patriots, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is like the perfect landing spot. He has to be the wide receiver 1." I think I might have even said that, and it's like, well, that was a mistake. And it's like Jameson Williams goes top 10, but Skye Moore goes to Green Bay or Kansas City, and it's like, I mean, the NFL thought this guy is a top 10 talent, and like this one team thought this guy is, a low-end round 1 talent, or like the rest of the NFL thought he was a low-end round 1 talent. And it's like, so Jameson Williams is probably just better, Kansas City too. I mean, like maybe that's a red flag given their track record on position players. But Green Bay, that's hard to argue with. Green Bay is nice.
Well, which of these groups, sort of buckets, would you think is riskier in terms of overall, but then also projecting them into certain spots? Are the kind of receivers associated one way or another with Ohio State, or are these 2 big guys that you mentioned earlier in terms of London and Burks?
I think Burks by far has the most damning red flag. It's just like the profile is very Laviska Shenault-esque. And I've gone back and forth with like so many people on this. Danny Kelly is like a huge fan of it. I mean, we've just gone back and forth. And like at the end of this now, it's just like, do we know anything? Like what is real? Is the answer just to eat Arby's? But his red flags are so he had like the worst teammate score of any wide receiver in my model. He just had like decently competent quarterback play, but like future used car salesman competing for targets alongside of him. I dismiss that. I didn't think that was a compelling argument. For one thing, he led the class in passer rating when targeted. The team, it was a near perfect passer rating when targeted, and it was a very mediocre to sub-mediocre when targeting anyone else. The damning red flag is basically so he never faced press coverage. He was predominantly in the slot. He had a ton of manufactured production coming on screens, and then really he was never asked to actually beat a cornerback in coverage, and wide receivers are supposed to beat cornerbacks in coverage. So minus screens, which are just a proxy for manufactured touches, and go routes, which make up 22% of all wide receiver yardage in college, but just 14% in the NFL. So it's more of a college route than an NFL route. He didn't really do anything. So last season, 56% of his yardage came on screens and goes. That was by far the most of any wide receiver invited to the combine. It was far more than Laviska Shenault in 2018. Jameson Williams, the best deep threat in the class, was at 17%. And then he didn't run a nuanced route tree, but he again never faced cornerbacks, had to beat cornerbacks in coverage. He only had 17 non-screen catches against single man coverage when lined up as a wide receiver, so excluding running back routes. Among the top 15 wide receivers in the class, only one wide receiver ranked below him. That was George Pickens. Only had five total catches all year, did injury. And again, that was perfectly in line with Laviska Shenault's 2018. The problem is, great yards after the catch, but 32% of his yards after the catch came on just 3 plays. That knocks him from 9.3 best in the class to 6.7, tied with John Mechie. And so it's just a bunch of things like that. What I will say, again, this wide receiver class is driving me crazy. By far the smallest sample in routes outside, routes against press, routes against whatever, things like that. He was easily wide receiver 1. It was just by far the smallest sample. So it's a question of he wasn't asked to do this thing. Can he do this thing? I don't know. I just see risky. I see landing spot dependent. I see him a slow starter early in his career. Just super risky on him.
There's a number of guys that I want to ask. You mentioned Pickens there, and he's going to be in this list, but also Watson, and probably the buzziest of all the names is Skye Moore, but they are kind of guys who are now getting to the point where they're trendy. They feel like they're late first round, early second round maybe picks, but we'll see how it goes over the next week or so. But do you think those guys can sneak into that first round in the NFL draft? And then the second part of that question is, are you excited about any of those 3 guys that I did mention?
Yeah, what were the 3 one more time? I'm sorry.
Skye Moore, Watson, and Pickens.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I really like Pickens. I probably like Pickens more than Burks. I might like him. If I stay true to my model, I can't like him over Olave, but you can make an argument for it. I think Olave's red flag is far more severe than anything negative on Pickens. I want him to be that high. I don't know. I really like him. The non-power 5 guys, my model hates non-power 5 guys, and I just kind of hate non-power 5 guys too. Christian Watson, just insanely athletic, but FCS wide receiver. I mean, those guys are so hard to trust. The hit rate on those are super low, except the 2 biggest hits ever were randomly both FCS wide receivers, and Jerry Rice and Jerry Vanilla Rice, Jerry White Rice, Cooper Kupp. So just is he the next one of those? Probably not, but he is one of the most athletic wide receivers ever, and he put up some of the best yards per route run seasons ever. He glides like Randy Moss, but he also didn't really run real routes, faced insurance salesman levels of competition. He was the worst wide receiver in the class at contested catches, despite his size. He, a bunch of flaws in that. Skye Moore, I wanted to because people comped him to Golden Tate, and Golden Tate's one of my favorite wide receivers ever. So I was really excited to watch him, and I just definitely didn't see Golden Tate. I thought it was insulting to Golden Tate, and I just didn't love the route running. I thought he was slot only, and the model wasn't really high on him at all. It's hard. Here, let me just pick your brain on this, but it's Dwayne Estridge's 2020 season, which, keep in mind, Dwayne Estridge, I know he's a lot older, but he played cornerback the year before. And his 2020 season was significantly more impressive than Skye Moore's 2021 season. Again, you have to age adjust that, sure. But also, Skye Moore's breakout 2019 season wasn't as impressive as the wide receiver one he had the year before that, Jalen Reed, who had significantly inferior quarterback play. John Wasink, a UDFA, Caleb Alabe, Skye Moore's quarterback, is the QB8. He was competing for targets against Estridge, who was still playing wide receiver at the time. And I thought Reed's season was better if age adjusted. He was younger, and if competition adjusted. And so it's just the numbers, I think, are just solid. But I also do hate non-power 5 wide receivers. That's just my bias, my model's bias. He's athletic. He's super athletic. He is that.
I'm still stuck on the fact that you made such a strong show in favor of Golden Tate there. Golden Tate, a solid player.
Oh, I'm so personally so he had one trump card, and he did it better than anyone else, and that was he was the missed tackles forced god. So from 2011 to 2018, he ranked top 3 in missed tackles forced for reception of 80 plus qualifiers in every single season. And it's just that thing he did, which he was not a true PPR cheat code, but he wasn't too far off that. And I just like that aspect of his game. The numbers didn't bear it out that Skye Moore was that great of a missed tackle guy.
Well, let me ask you about another player here that tends to be a little bit above that group, but I think that fantasy managers have not been excited. You've had a chance to get Dotson very late in some pre-NFL drafts, and it doesn't seem like there's any way other than he will rise. Whether or not he rises and pays off, or rises and then you wish you just continue to ignore him, is another question. But a lot of fantasy managers like that previous sort of trendy trio. Where do you put him compared to that group? The NFL decision makers seem to like him quite a bit better.
Yeah, so I probably have him right behind Pickens, or actually probably behind Burks, who's after Pickens. Concerns with him, super low BMI. He's probably a slot only guy, pretty bad athleticism. But I found myself trying to make arguments for him. His numbers didn't really jump off the page and wow you. But he also had easily the worst quarterback play of any of these, fringe round 1 power 5 guys. So you can compare him to Chris Olave, right? Chris Olave had maybe the best quarterback play in football last year and the year before that. Shawn Clifford, his quarterback, ranked bottom 15 of 50 plus qualifying Power 5 quarterbacks by PFF pass grade. According to PFF last season, Dotson was open on 66% of his targets, traveling 10 yards or more. It was only slightly less than Chris Olave's 70%. He had the same level, the same average depth of targets, was the same difficulty of throw. But Olave's targets on those throws were accurate 68% of the time, while Dotson was just 42%. So that's like a 62% advantage in Olave's favor. But Olave was only 7% more efficient by yards per target average. So, when you factor in QB play to the mix, I think Dotson looks far more impressive. And like that's another guy who like I did that with a bunch of different players where it's, stack them up to a Chris Olave and it's like, hey, make some arguments. This guy seems more impressive, at least in some ways.
The part that people love to hear is the sleeper category. Who's there that could make this massive jump, low capital, who becomes a superstar. Maybe that doesn't happen in this draft. The truth is it doesn't happen in most drafts. But is there anyone that's standing out to you as a kind of mid to late round pick that your model is excited about?
Yeah, of the day 3 guys, we could talk Justin Ross, we could talk Wan'Dale Robinson, or we could talk Taekwon Thornton. I stripped Justin Ross from my model, and I just put him in his own bucket, his own tier. He's projected to be drafted in round 7, which, that's not good. But if this were the wide receiver who, we saw in 2018 to 2019 when he had 96% of T. Higgins receiving yards on 94% of T. Higgins routes run. And 2020 didn't happen. The spine injury never happened. Or the congenital issue. 2021 didn't happen, where, by the way, he had a broken bone in his foot that he played through the entire season with bottom 5 levels of quarterback play. So if you throw out 2020 and 2021, just look at the guy, just first 2 seasons. This is arguably, wide receiver 3 by the numbers, wide receiver 4 by the numbers. The issue is, like, it seems the NFL is really worried. They don't think maybe he can ever be the same player again. He heard from neurosurgeons and multiple doctors who said he should never play football again. But so basically from 2019 to 2020, Ross had 88.5% of T. Higgins receiving yards, playing alongside him on 86.8% as many route runs. This is a guy who is going round 3 in rookie drafts. Again, he on that team was also Amari Rodgers, a round 3 pick, Hunter Renfro, Fantasy's wide receiver 10 in 2021. He averaged 4.98 yards per route run. That's the best season by any wide receiver since at least 2014 of 4,000 qualifiers. Significantly better than Devonta Smith's 2020 season, which ranked 2nd with 4.39. If age adjusted, nothing comes close. If age and competition adjusted, nothing comes close. Only Jamar Smith and Jackson Smith and Jigba. So it's really a balance of, hey, this guy could go undrafted. Multiple doctors and neurosurgeons have told him he should never play football again. He's trying to be the first known player to make the NFL with a congenital fusion in his spine. Or you're getting T. Higgins at a fraction of the cost. That's basically the question you have. I'm actually not taking him in rookie drafts. I'm expecting low end day 3 draft capital. So I'm just waiting for that to hold true and then load up everywhere. But who knows? Maybe he goes round 2. Maybe he goes round 3. But really love his upside as the ideal upside wins championships rookie pick for 2022.
Scott, you mentioned all of these different elements, and I have to say that I'm very intrigued by Ross and getting him a lot of places. You mentioned he probably will be even cheaper, and that's something to factor in. How much of this, round 6, round 7 undrafted kind of element relates to him actually doing some workouts and testing as a non-NFL athlete, as opposed to just saying, look, I'm rehabbing multiple things. I'm not ready. I don't need to work out now. It's 6 months before the NFL season. For these guys who do want to prove that they can actually walk, it's like, just walk. Like, don't do a workout and test so poorly. Is that the element, or is it that they think that, the neck is a done deal?
Yeah, so we heard that about Garrett Prince too, a non-combine invite tight end I like a lot. He went through his pro day through injury and just like a big mistake. The guy's like a track star, and he tested horribly. I actually have sources on Justin Ross. I'm not really a source guy, but I have sources. Sources told me that he wasn't physically able to train for the events. He didn't prepare for the 40 or anything else because he physically couldn't. He's not an athletic guy anyway. That's not his archetype, but definitely take his testing numbers with a grain of salt. But yeah, I think the real fear is that the NFL doesn't want to take the risk of drafting or playing a guy who with this issue. And I think many teams wonder if he'll ever be the same player again, because his entire 2021 season was marred by a very serious foot injury.
So Scott, we got to get you out of here before your apartment burns down, but leave us with the must draft wide receiver in 2022.
Crap. I guess it's Justin Ross after he falls to round 7. I think, there's a really good chance he never does anything, but there's also that chance, again, you got basically T Higgins, or maybe even T Higgins plus for a late round 4 pick. So he's just my type.
Did you enjoy that clip? Make sure you hit that subscribe button to get more content from RotoViz. And of course, you can check out full-length podcasts at rotoviz.com/podcast. Available on all podcast platforms. Check out our wide range of content. Once again, rotoviz.com/podcast.